Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters on Dublin South FM, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon. We've an interesting lineup ahead for today, and first in studio with us is David Byrne, the newly appointed Managing Director of Lisney's. So David, you're very welcome. The last time you joined us in studio, you were head of residential.
That's right, Carol. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Well, congratulations on your appointment. That's very significant. And I know we just spoke about Lisney last week published the outlook for 2020.
That's right. Yeah, indeed. At the beginning of every year, I guess we stand back and try and have a look and see what the year ahead is going to bring. Obviously, we're not only into a new year now, but a new decade. So there's lots to ponder on. We've come through, I suppose, quite a fascinating decade in some respects in terms of the property market and what's happened. And hopefully we're entering into a little bit more stability and hopefully maybe more exciting developments in the market in the decade ahead.
Absolutely. There was something very reflective. I think New Year, is always a time for reflection and new decades, particularly so. But the last decade certainly must be one of the most interesting, and chaotic times in the marketplace.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, the marketplace is made up of people, as you know, and the decade had a profound effect on society, in terms of what happened in the property market from the peak to the crash at the beginning of the decade, 2010, through the recovery, and back up to a kind of a more stable platform now. And, I suppose the interaction with people has been so interesting over that time. We have seen some terribly difficult stories where people have faced severe financial difficulty due to property-related decisions, through a recovery where there's, I guess, an opportunity for people now. So it's actually a very interesting industry. Of course, it's about property, but it's also very much about people.
Yeah, certainly on the show here, at least 20 or 30 minutes every week we try to spend on technology. And one of the things that we're consistently trying to remind people is, as we're bringing in new tools and technology, property is still about people, from planning, construction, development, right through to delivering the end product. It's all for the people.
It is for the people, and of course any of those decisions in whatever area of the market you're involved in are very significant decisions. So whilst there's much of our life we've been happy to let to the technological platforms, I suppose significant advice, there's nothing like sitting across a table and speaking to somebody and hearing that advice directly.
Yeah.
There's no doubt PropTech is going to have a significant impact on the property industry, I think, in the decade ahead. But I think people will remain fundamental to that piece. I don't think, and I hope we're not replaced by technology in the decade ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. I think a couple of years ago, the technology, there was certainly the technology has been spoken about in quite threatening terms to the profession. And I think, if anything, we've seen an evolution out of that, where we're moving to this space as a service model. So, in fact, property has always been a service model.
Yes.
And technology will only ever be the tool for that service.
I agree. I think, absolutely. Technology will be there to assist, if you like, in the transaction of property. But again, it's such a significant decision for people to make, irrespective of what area of property they're in, that people will remain pivotal to it. I mean, it's funny, I read an article a number of years ago about the residential market and technology, will replace estate agents. Why do you need an estate agent? It can all be done online. And, I suppose there's an element of that at first glance appears to be true. And it was an article in the Financial Times. And what the journalist was essentially saying is, you can't remove emotion from property. It's very difficult, particularly in the residential market. And of course, the one thing technology doesn't do is emotion. So from a residential perspective, there's a huge amount of subjectivity in terms of the advice you have to give, depending on the circumstances somebody finds themselves in.
Yeah.
I think
absolutely. And in fact, I think a good rule of thumb there is that technology automates the processes.
Exactly.
And they are things we want to automate. So, for example, I think the increased transparency is really important.
Yeah.
And that's in line with changing trends and buyers. So, obviously, you've been in the marketplace for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, as an organisation, what kind of changing trends are you seeing with the buyers coming into you?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, transparency, as you say, is a really critical factor. And I think, you know, let's call a spade. One of the issues the industry has had is perhaps people's view that, you know, there's more going on behind the scenes than they're actually being told about, which there isn't. I mean, the industry is very heavily regulated and rightly so. But we live in a world now where we pick up our smartphone and we expect to see everything in front of our eyes straight away. So I think that's where technology will evolve to. So, you know, if you're placing an offer on a property, the ability to open your device and see what your offer is, what all the other offers are, will be terribly important. It's information that should be made available immediately to people.
Well, the information that's otherwise made available if you phone the office.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But if you think about all of the transactions people do on their phone now, you know, and I guess that hackneyed term of people who are time poor on the bus in the morning, checking their phone, their emails, their bank accounts or whatever, the property industry needs to develop towards that space where information is more readily available. When I started in Lisney 20 years ago, the property supplement came out on a Thursday, and that was the busiest day of the week in the office. The phone would ring.
That must be the Irish Times, son.
The Irish Times.
Has it changed much?
Well, what's been fascinating is that, you know, 20 years ago, the web, or the World Wide Web wasn't a feature in our day-to-day lives. So the phones would ring, people asking questions. Of course, now everything is online. So the phone doesn't ring particularly more on a Thursday than it does any other day of the week. And I think that will become an increasing feature of the market as we move forward. But as you say, when it comes down to the critical piece of needing to make a decision, needing that advice, people pick up the phone. People want to speak to somebody.
Yeah. See, trust, this is still one of the largest transactions. So whether we're talking about residential, for a first-time buyer or a family trading up and down, or right through to investors for commercial properties or occupiers for commercial property, this is a business that can only survive on trust.
Yes.
And I think the shape of trust has changed over the past few decades.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, in a positive way, in a sense that I think, dare I say that it has actually shaped the industry in a positive way. Trust has become absolutely critical. So people won't accept anymore interacting in a business manner with an industry that they don't trust. They just will fundamentally step back from it. So it organically has kind of forced the industry that, you know, would have been dogged by kind of a poor reputation in the past into a space that you have to operate in a manner that is trustful, and people intrinsically have that trust in you in the service that you're providing. And I think that's always been very much to our core value in Lisney. We're 85 years in existence. Thankfully, I'm not there 85 years myself. But that is absolutely to our core. It's trust, integrity. And they're the brands, I think, that survive. And they're the people that survive in the industry, that develop this rapport in the industry that you can trust. And
I think that's one of the key things that we learned over the past decade, when all else was chaotic. People did gravitate to the brands that were well established in the Irish marketplace. You know, and by the way, that's rightly so. That's why brands deserve the respect and credibility that they spend decades building up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I always think it's interesting to watch the changing trends, because from what I can see over the past decade and a half, the trends seem to be getting shorter. So we're seeing changes, you know, on an annual and you know, on a 2 and 3 year basis, maybe that we mightn't have seen for a decade before that. Yeah. And I don't think technology is the only driver for that. So for example, we're seeing a huge shift in priorities towards sustainability, and
Absolutely.
the real estate sector has a huge part to play in that. Is that something that's on your agenda?
Yeah, very much so. So, I suppose when I referenced exciting things to happen in the decade ahead, I think this is going to be the fundamental focus for the real estate sector in the decade ahead. This, I suppose, this global movement of an enhanced awareness of the importance of climate change, of sustainability, not only of the buildings we live in, but, the products we consume. And this is going to have to become a very significant component part of the industry in the decade ahead. We're already seeing it, but I think we're actually only beginning to see the tip of the iceberg of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think within Lisney's, you obviously have a good global overview of the marketplace because you're dealing right across residential and commercial. You mentioned before we came on air that 2/3 of the work at the moment is...
2/3 of our business would be commercial valuations, professional services, and 1/3 residential. So we have a broad spectrum of view across the business or the industry in its entirety.
And in terms of commercial property trends, it's funny. I was just remarking to somebody earlier today that I can remember reading a media piece from Ireland just maybe 3 or 4 years ago saying that we couldn't possibly fill all these offices we're building.
I know.
And now we're seeing that actually offices are being, the demand or the supply is being swallowed up as soon as it's being delivered and before it's being delivered to the marketplace.
Yeah.
So, where is your overview on offices for 2020?
Well, I think if you look back 10 years, I think it would have been hard to even comprehend that we'd be in this space now. The tech sector is such a significant sector in Dublin and indeed Cork. 50% of all occupancy over the last 4 years has been taken up by the tech sector.
Do you see that as being sustainable?
I think Ireland is a very favourable environment in which to do business for the tech sector. Obviously, I guess it does provide a vulnerability to the economy as a whole if there was any unforeseen circumstance that was result in these companies withdrawing from Ireland. But if you look at the investment that they are making in terms of, I suppose, setting down roots in Ireland, I think, yes, it is sustainable. Of course, one would never like to see it overtake the market entirely. What has happened in the office sector is there now is a kind of a two-tier market. So you have these tech giants, as it were, who come in, who have such financial firepower that rent is actually secondary to what they want. They want, facilities, they want amenities, they want the location, and they can have the pick of offices they want. And then you've got the professional service firms, the indigenous firms that would have made up the occupiers of the prestigious offices in Dublin in years past, the professional services firms that are actually struggling to compete.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to find a fine balance between creating room for the indigenous businesses to still exist in our city alongside the tech sector. But that will require further development.
And that's so important. I think it's interesting when you talk about maybe for these office occupiers that the value of the rent, that's not a primary concern. It really is about the amenities. And I remember maybe just in early 2019, I read a piece from UK, I think possibly a States Gazette, talking about the office arms race. So essentially that the competition to raise the bar on each new office delivered has just, it's become something that we couldn't ever have imagined in the office space.
No, well, I mean, again, look back at the skeleton that was, the former Anglo-Irish building lying idle on the docks to the central bank being there now. I mean, the facilities, it's frightening, and in office space from, gyms, swimming pools, cafeterias that are world-class dining inside the office where people don't actually have to leave their office from morning to night, which of course Google was so famous for providing these phenomenal facilities for staff, which actually were ultimately about kind of keeping the staff in the working environment. is a remarkable change in office space, and in actual fact it plays a component part in attracting talent.
Yeah.
So if you're coming out of school or college now, the ability to go in and work in an office with a gym and a swimming pool and a cafeteria and all these things, that's remarkable. I mean,
Are we starting to see a shift though in like just towards the end of last year? I saw I think it was Hibernia on one of their buildings, maybe 1 Windmill Lane,
Yes.
had welcomed beehives,
Yes.
and so suddenly are we shifting from those perks or extras in the office becoming more about feeding into a sustainable environment? And if so, who's driving that?
Yeah, I think sustainability sustainability is at the individual level, but it's also at the corporate level, and most definitely you might say the demographic that are most acutely aware of climate change and sustainability are actually the 20-somethings coming out of school and college now, and as important to them as the facilities are the sustainability of the building that they're working in. So again, at a commercial level, the commercial entities are having to respond to this, be socially responsible, and develop office buildings that are sustainable.
Well, maybe on that, in that whole vein, just before we let you go, maybe we could have a quick chat about the NZEB, the near zero energy building.
Yes. Yeah.
How you think that's likely to impact the market?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think it's a welcome development. It was always going to be a hard transition for us to, particularly in the residential sector, to get from our traditional, 40s, 50s housing stock suddenly up to these A-rated houses. But from December 2020, all new homes will have to be A2.
Yeah.
All second-hand residential properties that are substantially refurbished will have to be a B2 rating. And there's a bit of pain in all of that for the person who owns a second-hand house, if you like, because the cost of bringing...
And our vendors, when potential or would-be vendors are coming to you, are they aware of this even?
I think there's only beginning to be an awareness of it now, to be honest with you.
So there's a bit of an education process that needs to happen.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, and say for buyers coming in, is this something that's high on their priorities?
Yes, buyers are probably more aware of it, certainly even in the last 12 months, as you were referring to, changing trends. When building energy rating certificates came in, people spoke about them a lot, but all they did was actually grade the building, if you like, as to how energy efficient it was. Now buyers are acutely aware of the cost of running a building, how energy efficient it is. And of course, that's the attraction of new homes, which is a significant advantage to somebody buying a new home. I guess all the hard work has been done for them. But, you've got the factor of the cost, the cost efficiency of running the building or your home, and then the zero energy emittance of carbon dioxide into the environment, if you like. So there's a kind of a dual feel-good factor there in terms of your occupation of a home or an office, but it's right across the property sector. Yeah,
and that seems to be, in fact, we had Barry Cull from Head of Homes in South Dublin from AIB in with us last week, and he talked about AIB introducing the new green mortgage at lower interest rates. So it's good to see that level of consistency, because that's where we're going to start to promote the culture shift that's needed. So again, it's a very positive thing. So David, thank you so much for being with us today. That was David Byrne, Managing Director of Lisney's. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll be speaking to Thomas Campbell, Director of the TA Group.
Broadcasting to South Dublin on 93.9. This is Dublin South FM.
Now, welcome back to Property Matters here on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Talon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So as mentioned before the break, we're joined by Thomas Campbell, Director of TA Group. Thomas, you're very welcome. You might tell us a little bit about TA Group.
Yes, so TA Group, we're a complete service provider to the building and civil engineering sector. So to go into a bit more detail on that, we provide planning, architectural, engineering services, mechanical, electrical, fire engineering to the civil engineering and building sector. I suppose the background to it, is I'm a civil engineer myself, chartered civil engineer, and work predominantly in the water and wastewater sector, where the design build model is very common for above ground infrastructure. So I took that model and introduced it to the residential sector. So we can combine the design build, and the build element together, which I suppose removes a lot of the pitfalls that you can have especially in building control elements and compliance.
Okay, and do you operate? I know you're based in Mayo.
Yes.
But do you operate in the region or nationally?
So we operate nationally. So to give you a little taste of the projects we're involved in, we're working with the Carlow County Council in delivery of 50 social houses. So we're acting as the civil and structural consultant, the assigned certifier, and building control compliance. We're also just kicked off with our first project with the Department of Education, a 2-classroom extension, and we're acting there as the assigned certifier and fire engineer. And we're part of a larger design team where the Department of Education are the architect, and there's separately appointed civil and structural consultants and M&E consultants. Our third project is a build-only project. I can't talk too much about it just yet, but it's enabling works, specialised civil engineering works. And our last project, which is our flagship project, is a development we hope to bring to market in Kelchma in Mayo in 2020.
Is that a residential?
A residential development. So this development was procured by TA Group. It was architecturally designed by ourselves. We achieved planning just before Christmas. So we're now in our marketing phase and kind of financial setup phase for the development.
So that's a big transition for an engineering firm.
Yes, well, I suppose, like I said, taking the design build model and coming out of the civil engineering sector, I happen to specialise in the role of a science certifier in a previous life for the building elements of those projects. So residential building wasn't uncommon to me. So like I said, we brought that model to the residential sector. So like I said, that development will be the first NZEB development in Mayo, hopefully in 2020. And it's, like I said, it's our flagship. It combines all our talents that we can take the project from conception to completion.
Very good. Well, there's a couple of things I want to ask you about there, but actually first, broadly, how is the residential market in Mayo and in and around Kilchma?
So I suppose like every place outside Dublin, the demand is there. There was always a demand there. The issue is the cost of delivering new homes to the new standard, and the struggle that people have in getting mortgages nowadays. And it's
I'm just going to kind of stop you there, just because we talk about demand.
Yeah.
But in fact, earlier this month, I spoke to a developer, and he really challenged me to qualify demand. Like, can we say we have demand for 35,000 homes per year, or even break that down regionally when those 35,000 would not qualify under the new central bank macroprudential rules? So, do we need to be more realistic and say, under the lending guidelines that we have in Ireland, we have qualified demand of possibly 20,000 per year, and then suddenly that changes?
Yes, that's a valid point, and that's kind of along the lines that I was talking about, or I've thought about, is we have, if you take each element and look at it in isolation, which I think unfortunately maybe our policymakers are doing. So you have your lending bank rules, which are a good thing, keep control on spending and mortgages. You have the new building control and compliance element, again, is very good for new buildings and bringing them up to the most efficient that we can do. But then try and marry those together. There's a mismatch.
And that's pushing viability of development projects in many areas.
Absolutely.
And I know, you prefaced this point by saying that places outside of Dublin, but the reality is home builders in Dublin would say that actually, there are viability issues in Dublin as well, because we're at peak affordability. And I think just before Christmas, the Construction Industry Federation, the CIF, they fed into an article in the Irish Independent that said, actually, really we're pushed in terms of affordability. The market can't pay anymore, so it's not a case of delivery. So have we overcorrected with our building standards?
From an assigned person and assigned certifier point of view, absolutely not. I think that was one area that was lacking. There was no oversight, there was no inspection, there was no control. So that area is correct. There has been some thought on, well, is an A2 home the most efficient from a carbon footprint point of view when you consider all the elements that goes into an A2 rated home? I do think that the big difference, say, from an A3 to an A2 rated home is your mechanical ventilation. So nowadays, for an A2 home, you have to have your mechanical ventilation. Me personally, I think that's a more important point from a health point of view, because currently a lot of A3 rated homes aren't ventilated correctly and you get build-up of mould or you have health issues. So from that point of view, I think it's correct. But going back to overcorrection, I suppose the government have been allergic to do anything that might stimulate or help the delivery of homes. Like,
do you mean incentivise, to be seen to incentivise development?
Yes,
but yet the Help to Buy scheme, is very much a supply side initiative. So it is support for developers, just under a more politically palatable way of distributing it.
Yes, like I've thought about the removal of VAT has been talked about a number of times, and they say, okay, the house prices will just go up. Well, for instance, if Pascal Dunn, who was sitting here in the room tonight, I know what the houses in Kelchima are going to cost. If Pascal Dunn, who turned around to me and said, yeah, we'll write the VAT off this, my house price is going to stay the same. Currently, the VAT, between VAT and local contributions to Mayo County Council, that equates to almost 18% of the cost of delivery of the home. There's a big difference between the cost of a home to build and the cost to deliver a home when you add in contributions, VAT, comparing that to the build cost.
Yeah, right. But sorry, did you say that if the VAT was taken off today, the cost would still be the same? No,
say the sale price to the homeowner would all of a sudden would drop by 17 or 18%.
Okay.
Taking our development in Mayo, because the VAT. The VAT is going directly, obviously, to the government. Okay,
and why do you think that this hasn't happened? Because I know, again, it's something that lobby groups within the industry really were quite persistent about, maybe 2 years ago. Yeah. And then last year, that seemed to fall off the agenda. Was it that we gave up on it?
That's a possibility. I suppose the risk to a policy like that is future developments that haven't launched yet, or there isn't a sale price set on it yet. If they've seen the VAT removed from property, well, then they're going to creep up their price. And
by the way, that's exactly the argument that's made against this. But yet, we saw it work efficiently for the tourism industry. So is there something that could be done on a temporary basis?
I think so. I think developers that have developments ready to go, they know what their cost base is, they know what their sale price is. I think if something in the short term could be done for those developments, that over the next 2-3 year period, because those projects are in the pipeline, it's just the viability element of it.
Okay, well then let's stick looking west at the residential market for a moment, if we can. In Dublin we see a huge increase in the private rented sector, the PRS delivery. We're not seeing that outside of certainly the main urban centres at the moment. So, say if we accept that there is residential demand on the sales point of view, where are we in terms of rentals? We've looked at the Galway market previously, but if we look at the Mayo market,
say take the big urban areas in Mayo, you're talking about your Castlebars and your Westports.
And I think, actually it feels almost flippant to include them in the same marketplace, because obviously there's a world of difference between Castlebar and Westport.
There is. I think the short answer is for the large institution rental bodies, the volume wouldn't be in those towns. That's kind of the short answer. But in terms of the actual rent that people are paying, they're up on €700-800 for a 3-bed semi-detached house.
And where is the supply and demand? Where is that sitting at the moment? So for the people who are currently seeking rental accommodation, is there supply there? Across the county, not necessarily in the larger towns.
There's a very, very limited supply. Anything that of quality is long gone. So it really, people are scrounging around for whatever is left. For example, in Kelchma and surrounding towns, there has been no new development for 12, 13 years. Mm-hmm. So you have people in rented accommodation who would love to buy and are probably in a reasonable position to go to the bank and get mortgage approval, but there's nothing out there for them to buy.
So the scheme that you're working on delivering in Kiltramagh, how many houses?
So there's
or is it houses?
Yeah,
I assumed.
Yes, correct. There's 14 homes, 10 semi-detached homes and 4 detached homes.
Will they fall into the price range of first-time buyers, or are you aiming more towards people trading up?
So the semi-detached homes most certainly will fall into the first-time buyer bracket. The detached homes, we're hoping you might have people already in semi-detached units that would like to upscale, because the detached homes can be arranged as a 4 or a 5 bed. They're up on 1,800 square foot. They're a large house. Likewise, the semi-detached units are up on 1,250 square foot. So they're decent sized homes. We spent a lot of time in planning them to make them as family friendly as possible. We actually arrange them that they can be open plan, so you have sunlight passing from the front of the house to the back of the house. Sometimes you can have an issue with semi-detached units where the kitchens can be quite dark. Mm-hmm. So we've incorporated a sunroom to the rear of all the properties to, I suppose, encourage the most inviting atmosphere possible and make it a home, as I said, a home for a family, designed by a family. That was our approach.
Okay, and again, that does sound very idealistic. Do you know, in terms of price point, where these are likely to fall, or what range?
Yeah, so the starting home is we call it a starting home. Price wise, they're going to start at €185,000 for a 3-bed semi-detached house.
With sunroom, and these are 1,200 square feet plus.
Yes, plus
with sunroom.
Yes,
I think listeners in Dublin might be a little bit frustrated to hear that.
Well, that's it. I have friends who have bought in Dublin, and when you see the prices that they're paying, and I come back to my point. There's a cost difference. There's a big difference between building a home and delivery of a home. Mm-hmm. A block is a block is a block. Relatively to where you buy it, it's land cost, it's contributions. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's a bit more premium on labour demand in the greater urban areas, but in terms of the raw material, it's the same price. Yeah,
but then where are we in terms of employment opportunities? So, for example, you mentioned that you've friends who have bought in Dublin, and certainly I lived for a time in Kerry, and I would know people who bought or built their homes in Kerry.
Yes.
And they're renting at extortionate prices up in Dublin because they would love to move home. They have an empty house sitting near family land at home.
Yes.
But they can't because there's no jobs. So, there's been huge progress in terms of initiatives like Grow Remote and the Western Economic Corridor to try encourage entrepreneurship and self-employment and industry in those areas.
Yeah.
But is that having an effect? Can you feel the effect?
You can. I'll go back to say that the 2 large urban areas, Westport and Castlebar. There's some big employers in those 2 towns, and I have other friends who finished in college in Dublin, worked in Dublin for years, and now have moved west. They've started a young family, and when they sat down and did the numbers, while in Dublin you can demand a larger salary, when you take in the cost of accommodation or rent and travel time, when you add it all up, okay, the salary might be that bit less in the West, but it's of better value to you when you put a value on your time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's interesting. And it's funny, whenever we talk about this kind of Eastern-Western divide as such, it always comes down to the employment opportunities. And yet what we're hearing across the construction sector in particular, is that the shortage of staff is really biting. And we've seen certainly in the Cork region, people tend to navigate to there, if they're from anywhere around Limerick, Tipperary, they can navigate to opportunities in Cork. Yeah. But say for people in Mayo, You know, where can they look for opportunities?
Well, say taking Kelchmaw's location, we're an hour from Galway City, we're an hour from Athlone, 50 minutes from Sligo, and still say 45 minutes west to the beach. So it's relatively central as a West of Ireland goes. And I must give a little plug to the IRD in Kelchmaw. They built a fantastic enterprise.
What's the IRD?
So they were a voluntary organisation that was set up in Kelchmaw over 20 years ago, with the idea of improving the town, driving business or the growth of business and employment in the town. So they built a fantastic what's called the Cairn International Trade Centre in Kelchmaw. It's state-of-the-art office space in Kelchmaw, and that unit now I think has 90% occupancy of. Is
it like a shared workspace?
There's I think 10 or 12 independent office suites in it. You have your fibre broadband. It's a modern office building, and there's a number of businesses. I think it's 90% occupied now, where
Excellent.
Local businesses have grown and needed additional space, and some external businesses have come into the town because of that facility.
That's great. This is something actually we have explored along the West Coast. These regional innovation hubs or co-working hubs have started to pop up, and you're showing that there's huge demand for it. You know, people are choosing quality of life. They're choosing,
Correct, yeah.
And particularly if you're from the area.
Yes,
it might be an aspiration to get back, so this might be a route towards it. Thomas, thank you so much. There's so much to cover there, and I hope you'll come back again
Absolutely.
to talk to us. Best of luck with the project in Kilchermont. Do keep us up to date with that. So
thank you very much.
That was Thomas Campbell of TA Group. By the way, what's your website?
tagroup.ie.
tagroup.ie. Thank you so much. We'll take another quick break, and after this we'll be speaking to Patrick Liddy, Customer Success Manager at UtilityAR.
You are listening to Dublin South FM on 93.9. この番組は地域密着型を目指しています。
Okay, I'm delighted to be joined in studio by Patrick Liddy, Customer Success Manager at UtilityAR. Patrick, you're very welcome to Property Matters. So tell me about UtilityAR.
Sure. So UtilityAR is a company that builds software for augmented reality glasses. So first of all, before I tell you about the company, I'm going to have to explain what I just said there.
Please do.
So augmented reality glasses are a new technology, and many would say a new paradigm in computing. But what that really means in English is they are transparent glasses that resemble safety glasses. However, information is projected on the glass so that the wearer can see digital information as well as seeing the real world as they go. They generally also have a forward-facing camera, and they're connected computers. They have a computing power of some sort. So what you have is a pair of glasses. So you live your life wearing safety glasses, and nothing has changed. They have a forward-facing camera, and that means the glasses, this computer, understands where it is in the world and can show you relevant information. So why that's of interest to us as a company who builds software for these things is we can train the glasses to understand something that they've seen. So let's just imagine you're installing an air handling unit in a new building. Well, the glasses will recognize the specific air handling unit. It'll link it back to the BIM system or to wherever information is about that particular air handling unit. And it can start showing you the step-by-step procedure that you would need to follow to install that piece of equipment.
So it's actually showing you?
It's showing you. So let me give you an example that you would understand very, very well. So if you buy a newspaper and leave it on the dashboard of your car, okay, and you then proceed to look out through the glass, you could, if you focus on the glass, you could actually see the newsprint, okay? So there's an example of information being projected onto the glass. AR glasses are doing something quite similar, whereby they're a little bit better than a newspaper in your car. But what they're doing is they're projecting information, and that could be text, which describes how to do something, or it could be an image, which allows you to see a schematic of what it is you want to do, or it could be playing a video clip. So what they would allow you to do is while you are seeing the real world and you're hands-free, you're just wearing a pair of glasses, you could watch a short 5-second, 10-second video clip of how to do the next step in the procedure, where it is that you should plug in this cable, what handle you should turn, whatever it is that you need to do. So these days we're all becoming very accustomed to going on YouTube. I know I am, certainly, of how to change the light bulb in my car. And I type in Skoda Octavia, change light bulb, and it brings me through a 20-minute video of how to do it. And what happens is I watch it on my phone, and I watch the thing, and then I start doing the task, and then I go, I can't remember how. Let me go back to the phone again. I have to walk back over, and I have to
start
again,
pause it, and
do it again, and do it again. So what we do is we give you a procedure-following sort of framework whereby you cut the procedure of how to install the light bulb in your car into 20 steps, into short, consumable little pieces of information to allow you to do it.
Okay. First of all, before we get into the use case of this, because I can imagine that we haven't even gotten to the tip of the iceberg of the use cases. How did you come to be in this? What's your background?
Sure. So my background is I'm an electrical engineer. And for a gathering number of years, I've been a bad electrical engineer.
Explain.
No, I studied, but the truth is I did a lot more stuff other than studying as well. But then I worked in a variety of jobs in the energy sector and got drawn into building energy efficiency software for large industrial energy users. So what we used to do, I had a company before called Activation Energy, and what we used to do was build energy efficiency software, which allowed large users to interact directly with the wholesale electricity market. So I would really geek you out on energy if you let me do it. We only have so much time.
That's a particularly relevant area at the moment as well. So when did you make the move into augmented reality, and when was UtilityAR established?
Cool. So that business that I had before, it required us to install lots of electrical metering and control equipment. And that meant that business, we hired lots of electricians and technicians and fitters to install pieces of equipment.
Were you training all of these people?
Well, training, I was setting out the work that they had to do. Yeah. They were qualified people in their own right, but we would say, well, this is how we want it installed and this is how it should work. And therefore, I wrote lots of procedures on how to install things. And I saw the challenge that it was to get and retain good staff. So that business was quite successful, and it was acquired by an American company. And a little later on, I encountered augmented reality glasses for the first time. So just to put out some brand names that people might have heard of, there's a thing called Microsoft HoloLens, or a company called Daiquiri, or Google Glass. And soon, companies that have announced that they're going to be putting out glasses soon are Samsung, Huawei. All the best technology or biggest technology companies in the world are moving into this space from a hardware point of view. And I went, wow, I could imagine how I would use this, which was to help technicians and engineers get their job done. I should tell you as well, though, I've left out the really exciting use case. So when I had that business, we were installing equipment all over Ireland and ultimately all over the UK as well. And there was one particular weekend where we had equipment being installed in Monaghan, and my in-laws were visiting my house in Dublin. And I got the call. The technician team who had been installing the equipment had been there for hours and were looking at this, and they just couldn't get it to work. No matter what they did, they couldn't get it to work. So my father-in-law and I drove to Monaghan to have a look at this piece of equipment and try and figure out what was wrong. And I went into the electrical switch room, and 30 seconds later, the problem was solved. It was simply they had something put in backwards, and so often that's the problem that you encounter.
If you had the AR glasses, would you have been able to see that?
That's right.
Remotely?
So the glasses allow you to do what are called remote advisor video calls, which are video calls whereby the electrician who was on site could have put on the glasses, done a call back to me, and allowed me to see in real time what he was seeing.
And would you look at that through your phone?
That's right. I could have pulled out my PC or on my phone, pulled up what he's seeing in real time, spoke to him through the glasses and the phone.
And through that, would you have been able to identify this one thing that was in backwards?
Certainly in that case, I would have. Certainly in that case.
But then you wouldn't have had a
hour and a half drive with my father-in-law.
I'm sure he's not listening. Okay. So when was that?
So that particular experience.
Well, no, but when did this kind of realization come in that, actually there's a lot of application for this?
Sure. So this is a new technology. Yeah. The first of these things began to pop up about 4 years ago, but we really began this company about 2 years ago when some of the other people who were in my team in that company are actually in this company now as well. When we saw that and we went, wow, light bulb moment. This is a real opportunity for anywhere where there are technical workers who are doing complicated tasks.
Yeah.
And in fact, increasingly not so technical workers doing complicated tasks.
Yeah. Well, the first time I came across yours and tried out the glasses was at the AR VR Innovate conference or exhibition in the RDS last May. So I was blown away by this, but I was particularly interested in the work you're doing for the construction sector because, again, this is not a sector that typically embraces technology and innovation or is very quick to embrace it, although we're obviously seeing that change. So where are you now in terms of construction applications?
Sure. So we've begun to work with some consulting engineer companies. We're getting a lot of interest in electricians and electrical installation, that sort of thing. And what I'd say to you is, so I've described two use cases to you there. One, which is procedure following, doing things right, following the step-by-step procedure. That's pretty dull. No one likes that. However, as management, we think it's very important. On the other hand, I told you about a video calling tool. And that's the solution to a stressful time where you just can't get the thing to work. The example I gave you there. There's a failure
of communication on both sides as well there, though.
There is. So what it is the example I gave to you, the electrician who was there, he's a very fine electrician. He was a good guy, okay? Just this problem came up and he just couldn't see it. And it was very stressful for him to have to pick up the phone and call me. Or indeed, had we tried to solve the problem over the phone, that's a very stressful thing to be on either side of that phone call where something isn't working. And we've all had that experience in all parts of our lives where you're trying to say, explain to me what you're seeing. Is it the button on the left? There is no button on the left. Turn it clockwise, the other clockwise. These challenges that we have to communicate. So what these glasses give us, or what this type of technology gives us, is a new tool to just better meet the requirements of the problem.
Okay. On site, are construction companies using this? I understand, I can see from an engineering point of view at a design stage, absolutely, how this would be relevant. But on site, is it actually being used in Ireland?
Yes is the short answer.
Okay, and how? Like, what applications?
So as I say, I think ultimately the immediate application, that is the video calling one that I just spoke about. So that is very, very attractive where you have, it could be a less experienced installer who is installing something, or you want to get some feedback from your international OEM. So that air handling unit that I'm talking about, if you want to get the guy from Italy or Germany or whatever to weigh in on whatever problem you have, that's a very interesting opportunity. And I think particularly at the commissioning phase, that sort of thing is very attractive.
Can you have multiple people calling in, like a conference call facility?
You can. That's
okay,
right.
Excellent.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose as we speak about it more, what you'll probably realize is these are all things which are very familiar to us. Video calling is quite familiar to us at this point.
Well, it is now. It wasn't 10 years ago.
Well, that tells you just how quickly technology moves, okay? Where when I begin to show someone our technology, they go, wow, this is very, very high tech. And by the end of the conversation, they're saying, is that it? What's the next thing you're going to show me? And that's because what sounds extremely futuristic people quickly realize this. Gosh, this is going to be normal, like in matter of years.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting, we try to dedicate, one section of the show every week to prop tech and construction technologies and new applications for emerging technologies. And, sometimes the feedback I get is, do we have the scale in Ireland? Are people ready to adapt? And I've seen that change a lot in the last maybe even 2 years to 3 years. More than that, we were getting a little bit of resistance when introducing new technologies, even for the purpose of testing, to allow them for testing environments. Whereas now, I think we've moved on to the point where people are able to integrate their technologies now. So they bring in one thing and they see how the next thing can plug in, and this is how technology is moving. But from my perspective, I'm seeing a huge gap between those who started to embrace technology and those who haven't, and that gap is widening very quickly. So, when you're dealing with construction companies, is there a profile of company that you can see who are quicker to adapt and to adopt these new technologies?
Sure. So I would say I'm going to have to give you two answers to that.
Do.
So first of all, we sell to people, not so much to companies. And what I mean by that is who we're looking for to engage with in any company is that interested in innovation and new things and better ways to do things, individual who wants to take on this project and run with it.
What role are they normally filling?
Well, our system is set up to allow the most junior intern to get a project up and running very quickly. But that said, generally speaking, we're talking to more senior site engineers who have budget and power to move this forward. But then the second answer to that question is any technology will only be successful if senior management are buying in to it being embraced. And what I mean by that is that every one of your staff is working on 20 different things. They're just rushing, trying to get things done. And even though our technology saves them a lot of time and energy and gets things done better, unless they're given the time and space to try this out and get used to it and push it forward, then it won't be used. Mm-hmm. So what we have experienced is our most successful companies and our least successful companies. The differentiator, the starting point is someone who said, yeah, we're going to do this. This is going to be great. But the differentiator between success is high-level management as to the degree to which they're bought in and their willingness to give time and space to their staff to try this out.
And I presume invest in the hardware and software.
Invest in the hardware, software. In truth, I think if you really dig in, the costs of most of these things is actually the external costs. Let's just say that my fees are quite low. The cost is your staff's time and space to allow them to think about one new thing and try and integrate that into their existing business. That's what we see as the very costly side of this.
Okay, see, I suppose we've seen so much in the latter part of the last decade, but now we're into 2020. What do you see for the next 2 to 3 years? How do you see technology across the construction industry being embraced?
So, I suppose what I think a technology like ours is a new form factor, okay? And we think it's a form factor that is more appropriate to digitize workers who work with their hands, okay? The computer is fine for people at desks, but for men and women who work out on the site, you need an appropriate form factor. So we're just selling one type of software. All the other data and informational projects that you're looking at will suddenly burst into usefulness when you give people a form factor that will allow them to consume that data. So we work with the ESB, for example, and they've been collecting terrific amounts of information for a long time, and now finally they're going to get to use it with these sorts of technologies.
That's pretty exciting. What we might do, Patrick, is we might check in with you again in a few months' time, see how adoption rates are going, and maybe you can fill us in on your latest use cases. So thank you so much for joining us. That was Patrick Liddy, Customer Success Manager at UtilityAR. Thank you. Now that's it from us today in studio. Thank you for listening into Property Matters, the show where property matters. Get in touch with the show by emailing hello@ipropertyradio.com or find us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio. Also, thank you to Peter Rice on sound and show producer Katie Talon. We're back the same time next week. From myself, Carol Talon, and all the team here, have a great week.